Hello, ladies, and welcome to Training Tuesday. I have been experiencing some technical challenges, so I'm just checking here that this is working because I tried to do this a few minutes ago and it didn't work. And oh, hey, we look like we're live! Yay! Welcome to Training Tuesday. Thank you for joining me. I had a great intro a few minutes ago and then realized that for some reason my screen was spiraling and I didn't seem to be live. So, thank you for joining me tonight. Thank you for your patience because I know I have basically shown up a little bit late, very unintentionally, but that is the joy of technology. So, I was very excited about tonight. I'm still excited about tonight. I'm excited about tonight because we're talking about being unapologetic. Unapologetic and saying what you mean without over explaining everything. Because that is a bit of what we do. It's a bit of what a lot of us do. It's also one of the topics that I get asked about the most is how do we use our voice? How do we show up with a strong voice, with a powerful voice? And there's really only a few key I was going to call them tricks, but they're not really tricks. A few key tips, I guess, that you need to keep in mind to be somebody who speaks with power, with influence, with authority. And it mostly comes down to breaking old habits and old patterns. So we're going to talk about that tonight. I want you to think about. I'm going to give you a personal kind of example, but you're going to see how this plays into a work example also. So, oh hey, it's Miss Christine. It's good to see you, Christine. Welcome. I have missed you. Um, I'm going to give you an example. You can tell me if this feels or sounds familiar, but here's the one thing that we notice when we look at speaking patterns between men and women, particularly when it comes to giving direction. And giving somebody directions is very similar to how we present a new idea in a meeting or in a conversation, because we're trying to provide all the context so that they get it. So I think about when I give my son like instructions to go to the grocery store because I want him to pick up my favorite peanut butter because I'm out. And so I'll start with, okay, I want you to go to the Shaw's, not the one down on Boylston, but the one on Gold Star Boulevard. Please go to that Shaw's. And when you walk into the Shaw's, you're going to find that it's, when you walk in the door, you have to walk into the door on the right side, by the way, not the left-hand doors when you're facing the building, but the right-hand doors. And when you go in those right-hand doors, go past all the fruit and veggies and things like that. And you're going to go down about 4 aisles. It's about 4 aisles down, and usually on the end cap, you'll know it's 4 aisles. It might be five, but it's one of those because on the end cap is usually the Dunkin' Donuts coffee. So when you see the Dunkin' Donuts coffee, assuming they haven't changed that display, but that's normally what's up there, you're going to turn right. And when you turn right, you're going to go down that aisle. You're probably going to go down like about 10 feet. It's usually right there, and not before you get to, if you've gone to the middle, you've gone too far. So you want to go about 10 feet. When you look at all the peanut butter, it's got a green label, but you've got to read the labels because it's got to be chunky, okay? The blue label says chunky, but that's not the brand that I like. I like the green label brand. It's called Teddy, and they have chunky peanut butter, but they mostly do creamy, and I really don't like creamy. So you got to read the label for chunky. It's usually about 3 shelves down, right? So 3 shelves down is where you've got to look. Sometimes they move it around if they do a promo. It's like up at the but typically look down. So look down for the green. Like at some point, usually way earlier than when I just stopped, my son is rolling his eyes and he's already out the door. He's like, "Yeah, Teddy, chunky, green label, got it." He will figure out the rest. But we as women, a lot of times, give all of these context clues, right? All of this over explanation of how to do the thing and how to get the thing. So I'm glad, Christine. I'm sorry your mom does that. A lot of us do it, and maybe not as extreme as that example I gave you, but that is often how we tell stories, how we communicate. It's also how we show up at work. And hey, Joyce is here. It's good to see you, Joyce. Welcome. So, for those of you who just bore with my peanut butter story, welcome to Training Tuesday. My name is Natalie Hahn. I am your coach, and we are here to talk about being unapologetic and really speaking with power and authority and influence, which means we are not over explaining and we are not apologizing for everything that comes out of our mouth. So the same energy at which you are giving directions to your partner, your friend, whoever, to go find the exact brand of peanut butter you're looking for is often the same energy that starts bubbling up, sometimes even more intensely, at work. Because we're asked maybe to present to a group, or we're told that they expect us to voice an opinion or bring an idea to the meeting. Or maybe we're just in the meeting and it's a little more spontaneous, but we have something to say. And in that moment, we're the center of attention. And what happens when we become the center of attention and then we have to use our voice? We have to open our mouth. Our heart starts to pound. Now, it might be a little more subtle, but you know it's an elevated heart rate. For some of you who are very nervous about speaking, like you feel it. Others of you may not be as nervous, but still, when the attention in the room is on us, a little bit of an elevated heart rate, a little bit more kind of shallow breathing. All the ideas are in your head, everything you want to say, all the details. And at the same time that your head is flooded with all this stuff, you're also just a little bit terrified that it might all go blank. You might lose it all, right? You're worried as you're looking around the room that Kevin is going to interrupt you, because Kevin always interrupts us. You wonder if someone else in the room is going to say, hey, wait, that was my idea. Hold on. Well, I already proposed that. You're worried that they won't get it, that they won't understand, that unless you provide all the details, all the background, how you got there, where it goes next, that they're not going to get how important it is, how brilliant it is, how creative it is. And that's when we start to speak. And then we start to speak a little faster because we're cramming in all the ideas and we're getting all this detail in and we're trying to explain the whole context. And now we're a little bit out of breath. And then we keep going and we're rushing so that Kevin doesn't interrupt us, even though we know it's Kevin. Of course he's going to interrupt us. And what ends up happening is all those words and all those thoughts rush in. It's too much detail. You've put your listeners in overwhelm. It's too chaotic for them to follow. They can't pick out what the important details are. Just like me giving directions in the store about how to find the peanut butter. Is it important that it's next to the aisle with Dunkin' Donuts coffee? I don't know. They might have changed the display. What were the important details for my son to remember? That it was 4 or 5 aisles down, or that it's called Teddy's and it's got a green label. But you throw so much out there, nobody knows what to remember. And if you've been in those meetings, you know you and your work bestie can listen to the same conversation and somebody's spinning word salad at you. And when you walk away, you heard one thing and your bestie heard another. Y'all heard the same word salad, but because your brains are trying to pick out the important parts, your brains are picking out the important parts that are more important to you. Not necessarily what was important for the speaker to get across. So when this happens, when we kind of give in to the need to just share all the detail and prove ourselves, because that's really what we're doing. When we go into over-explaining mode and apologizing mode, we're trying to prove that we have the right to the idea and that we're smart enough. When we're doing that, we lose our point, we lose the plot, and we lose our power. So, how do we fix that? How we fix that is by staying focused on what's our intention. The one question that solves 90% of this problem, 90% of the problem of the speaking up, the one question is, what is your intention? And there's 2 ways you answer this question to keep your mindset and your words on track. One is you answer the question, what is your intention, with what is my intention as a leader and as a speaker? Who do I want to show up as? Do I intend to show up as somebody who's thoughtful and analytical? Do I intend to show up as somebody who's creative, got a little bit of a wild on the edge idea, but my intention is in how do I intend to show up in this conversation and present this idea? That's one answer. The second way you need to answer the question is, what is the intention of the information I'm sharing? Am I sharing this idea because I want to persuade everybody to agree with me? Am I sharing this because I want to trigger debate and have a discussion? Am I sharing just to inform and let people know, hey, this is what I think you need to know for your information only? So you need to answer the question, what is your intention? Two ways. One is, how do I intend to show up? And what do I intend for the information I'm delivering? Now, the reason this is important is because the answer to both of those aspects of the one question then defines how you choose to share the information. So if you intend to show up as a thoughtful, powerful, focused, even energetic, creative, right, leader, however you're choosing to show up as a speaker, what it does is it gives you the identity that says, you know what, if I'm showing up as this kind of creative idea magnet, I've got this creative factory going on in my head of all these ideas and I want to share them, but I want people to listen, then one thing I'm not going to do is worry about being liked. I'm going to worry about being heard. When your intention is to show up as a leader and to speak with power, and regardless of whether your intention is to persuade or inform or direct, you are speaking to be heard, not to be liked. And that's really hard for us as women to take on, because we've been trained our entire lives to speak, to be liked. And in speaking to be liked, we speak a little quieter. We don't take up so much space. We use a lot of language to soften what we say. So we say things like, I'm not as experienced at this as you are, or I may not have all the facts, but, and I'm sorry, but. We use a lot of that language to couch what we're saying to make it land more softly. What that does is that undermines our authority. That makes us show up as uncertain. They're not hearing the words. They're not hearing you have more experience at this than I do, but they're not hearing the phrase. What they're hearing is, I don't know. I'm not certain. I'm not confident. That's what they're hearing, because that's the undercurrent of whatever softening phrase you're using. You think it's making you sound more approachable. You think it's making you sound more human, less vain, less egotistical. It's making you sound unconfident. So you want to replace that language. If it's hard for you to cut it out altogether, like, just don't say it. I mean, my first advice, but just don't say it. Don't say I'm sorry. Don't put those phrases in front of what you're going to say. But for some of us, that's hard. We're used to speaking in a pattern where we put those qualifying phrases. So make it a better qualifying phrase. Make it a stronger one. Instead of saying, well, I'm not the expert here, but flip it and say instead, based on what I know, here's what I propose. Here's my recommendation based on the facts today. So you got a qualifier, sure, but it's not one that says, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's one that says, I do know what I'm talking about, and here's the information I have. Practice these phrases practice them out loud, and two, practice them, and you can play with the wording a bit, but you want it to feel natural and comfortable to your speaking style. But remember, you're speaking to be heard and not to be liked, because if I asked you all, would you rather be liked or be respected? 90 to 95% of you are going to say respected. You're going to say it, but it's going to feel a little twingy in the heart here, because we're so used to playing to trying to be liked. So I just want you to think about that, though. You can be liked and not respected. You can be respected and not liked, but that's less common. That's less common. Even people, how do I phrase that? People we respect There's always a little bit of like for that person. Maybe you don't love the way they do something or say something, but if you respect the outcome of what they're doing, there's a lot more give and a lot more leeway, and you listen to them. You're influenced by them. So your intention is to be heard and not to be liked. And that underpins your intention of how you're going to show up and your intention of the message you're going to deliver. You want to also, number 2, stop over justifying. Stop it. Christine liked, no one respects me. I don't respect me. Not true, first of all. Second, I think you have the opposite problem, Christine. I think everybody likes you and respects you, and you don't see it. And when we don't see it in ourselves, then we don't reflect it back out. So again, this is about paying attention. I'll get to that at the end. This is about paying attention to how you show up and what you're doing. Second point I wanted to make on this whole keeping the end goal in mind is to stop over justifying, to stop the over explaining. I didn't need to give all the data points for all the places to look in the grocery store. It's confusing. When somebody is giving you so much content and so much context, and usually that includes repeating themselves multiple times, it signals to others you don't trust your own authority. You don't trust what you're saying, so you just have to keep talking. Silence and pauses are your friend. Because when you present an idea and then you pause, you are giving the rest of the room a moment to catch up to you. You've already thought about it. You already had the idea, and you've already boiled it down into your 1 to 2 sentences of here's the setting. Setting and context can be done in 1 to 2 sentences. It can take you 3 seconds or less. Then you present your main idea, maybe 2 to 5 sentences, and then you zip it. And let them take it in. And the power is in let them ask questions. When you're filling them with so much detail and information, they can't even follow the plot, much less have questions about what it is or what it means to them. You've taken away all the power and you've taken away all the influence. When people can ask questions and have their question answered, they feel like they're in an exchange with you. Now you have influence over them. If you're just word vomiting on them, you've lost your influence. I used to work with a guy who, okay, this is going to sound horribly mean, but this is true. This is true, and I'm just gonna go there with this, which is he was constantly repeating himself and all the context. Once he started talking, it was like all the air was sucked out of the room. You knew he was good for at least 4.5 minutes of straight conversation with no breath. He would sit back in his chair, he'd close his eyes, and then he would just blah, 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 blah. And so me and a couple co-workers in our less generous moments gave him the nickname of Cobb, C-O-B-B, for Cobb salad, because it was just a big word salad that was coming out of his mouth, and we couldn't make heads or tails out of what was important. And a Cobb salad is like that. Like, there's everything in a Cobb salad. Like, there's meat, there's egg, there's veggies, it's soaked in salad dressing, and not the healthy kind, right? So we would call him Cobb, because it was just all this stuff would come at us, and then we'd get off the phone with him, and we'd all be going, well, what did you take away from that? And we all took away something different, because we were hearing different words from all the sentences he was throwing out. Over-explaining like that shows that you don't trust your own idea, your own authority, to just let it sit and let people respond. Because here's the thing, we don't open our mouths. We don't often open our mouths without having thoroughly thought through what we're going to say. If you're in a situation where you're giving a presentation or you're presenting an idea, we already know you spent hours prepping this and thinking this through. You know more than anyone else in the room. You don't have to prove that. The fact that you are delivering the idea, the fact that you are the one people are going to ask questions to, is what's going to showcase that you've already thought this through. Even when it's off the cuff. So you're in a meeting, you had this idea, you had a moment to speak, and you did. Again, it's your idea. It's your idea. So you already have more knowledge, more intuition, more experience behind that idea because you thought of it. You don't have to over-explain it. You put it out there and you trust that whatever questions you get, you're going to be able to handle. And some of handling a question might be, that's a great question. Let me get back to you. So when you find yourself in that mode of over-talking, over-explaining, and the word salad, remind yourself, power is in the pause. And just be quiet. Just end your sentence. Don't say anything. Let it be quiet for a minute and see what the reaction is that you get, because that is where influence and power play come in exchange. I want you to think too that when you talk off the cuff, that first draft of whatever came out of your mouth, it's not a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's a message. You've delivered a message. And if it feels like it didn't land, they're not getting it, that's okay. You don't have to apologize for the way it first came out of your mouth. Because so many times I've heard speakers say something, I have no idea what they just said. None. But that doesn't mean they said it wrong. It could be I misheard it. It could be I wasn't listening. It could be any number of things. When you apologize, right? So when I have this idea and you say it and nobody in the room gets it, you don't have to say, oh, I'm sorry. Let me try this again. Oh, I'm sorry. That didn't make any sense, did it? Do I make sense? Do you understand? When you use those phrases, you're second guessing yourself. And it saps away at your leadership energy. So if you find yourself volunteering an idea and you're looking around the room and realizing maybe they don't get it, don't say, oh, I'm sorry, that didn't come out right. What you say is, let me reframe this. Or let me add some clarity to this. And you add another sentence or you rephrase the sentence, but you don't have to apologize for the first way it comes out. Joyce, you over-explain because it seems like I think differently than others and I'm not sure they understand. Fair, and, however, but, I'm figuring what's the conjunction here. That's fair, but I would use that as a strength and not view that as a weakness. When you have an idea and you explain it, allow there to be the power in the pause, because if they ask the question, could you explain this piece of it to me? I'm not sure what you meant by that. What was this part? That actually gives you better information than you over-explaining. That's one. You get better information. Two, you are still in control of the conversation. When you over-explain and you're diving into all that language, again, you're already crowding the mind of the listener. You're not giving them any space to process what you said so that they can understand it. You're not giving them any room to come to the table with their own thoughts, so there's no partnership, there's no influence happening here. You are instead throwing a bunch of language at them and kind of beating them down with it, and then nobody wants to engage with that because there's no dialogue, there's no open thought, and geez, did they get the point? Did they not get the point? It almost doesn't matter. There was so many words coming at them, they're just tired. And people will just tend to nod. This is what we do with Cobb salad guy. We would just nod and go, yeah, okay. All good, Cobb. And then we would just kind of look at each other and go, we'll figure it out later. Because we didn't really know what he wanted, or we didn't understand what the main point was. Let the silence do the heavy lifting so that it's the responsibility of the listener to ask the clarifying question. You might find they understand more than you think if you would allow them the space and the time to think it through. What did she say? What does she mean by that? Let me think about that for a minute. Now let me ask a clarifying question. Now let me poke it, hey, at that. Or let me say, I'm not sure I followed that. Can you hit me with that again? And you can say, sure. Let me reframe, or okay, let me clarify. And then you add a little bit more. But the point is that you purposefully and intentionally add the more, add the detail, without just going full force into the word vomit, because that doesn't give you any power and that doesn't give them anything to actually grab onto to fully understand the concept. So what I want you to do, the homework assignment for tonight, is to pay attention to the ways in which you are undermining your power and your authority when you speak. So Joyce, thank you for sharing that. For you, it's over-explaining. For others, it's those softening phrases. It's apologizing. Right. For some of us, it's just the constant word vomit. Even if it's not over-explaining, sometimes it's not over-explaining, and sometimes it's just too much content. There's too many details, and they don't need all that. They don't need the whole history of how you originally thought about this idea 4 days ago in the shower, and you were using this type of shampoo, and it was really cold that morning, but by the time that you got your clothes on, you were now onto this idea. Like, they don't need all that. Nobody needs all that. So pay attention to the behaviors that dim your light, right? That play down the power of your words and instead oversaturate them and make it hard to absorb. And give yourself permission to drop them, to change the pattern. And then use the tools that I gave you. Practice phrases like, here's how I see it. I'd like to offer a different perspective based on what I know. Here's what I'm proposing. Let me reframe that. Let me clarify for you, right? Practice these phrases that will allow you to take another go at it in a different way, but you still want to keep it short and you don't want to apologize for having to do it. Just because someone didn't understand you, it doesn't mean you were the one who was unclear. It just doesn't. We assume that because as women, we tend to assume it's always our fault. We assume that, but it's not. So pay attention to what your dimming behaviors are that are softening and playing down your language and making it less powerful. Use the tools and practice phrases that allow you to reframe in a way that's not apologizing, that's not dimming your light. And the most important part is to reset your mindset, because our mindset is around this idea that if we don't have all the answers and we don't explain everything and everybody doesn't get all at once, we must be wrong. And that's not it at all. In fact, what I encourage is that you trust yourself to not have all the answers. And that's okay. That it is okay for people to have questions and for you to go, not sure about that? I will get back to you. Or for them to ask questions and for you to say, that is a great question. Here's what I think. And provide another opinion. Not having the answer doesn't mean that you're wrong. It doesn't mean that you're not prepared. It doesn't mean that you're not competent. It doesn't mean any of those things. We spend and waste so much energy over preparing for questions that never get asked. We stay up till 3 a.m. for a presentation that we're going to deliver at 8 a.m. trying to prepare all the scenarios and ask all the questions so that we can answer all the questions. And 85 to 90% of those questions never get asked. And we wasted all that energy preparing because we were afraid. We were afraid of being asked a question we couldn't answer. And my challenge to you is to be okay not having the answer. It is okay to say, I need to check on that. Let me confirm this. I will get back to you. Doesn't mean you're wrong. Doesn't mean you're incompetent, and it doesn't mean you're stupid. It does mean that you might prioritize your sleep over preparing a presentation with questions nobody's going to ask. It does mean you have the confidence in yourself to be able to say to somebody else, I didn't retain all the answers, but I know where I can find that, and I will get that for you. Very few questions are so urgent that you have to answer them on the spot right away, or else you look like a failure. It's not how it works. All right, so for homework, pay attention to where you're dimming your light. Use the tools and phrases I gave you to reframe all those dimming phrases and turn them into something more powerful. And pay attention to the mindset, to where that voice in your head is telling you you're not smart enough, you're not good enough, you haven't got enough experience, blah, blah, blah. To remind yourself, you have the knowledge, you have the experience, and you have intuition. You have enough. You have enough. And you have the power, to say, I will get back to you. You have the power to say, I don't know. We're still fleshing out this idea. Would love to have more of your input on this. You don't have to know everything. Nobody expects you to but you. All right. Let's stop apologizing. Let's get out there and say what we mean and not over-explain it, and practice using our voices in a different way, and in a way that serves back to the original point. If you remember nothing else tonight, the question to ask yourself is, what is your intention? What is your intention in terms of showing up as a speaker? What is your intention in terms of the information you're delivering? And if you can answer those two questions, you can handle all the rest of the conversation. All right. Thank you for joining me tonight. Terry, I see that you've joined us. Welcome. And we are just wrapping up. So go out there this week, be completely unapologetic for who you are and how you are, and enjoy the rest of this brilliant week. I will see you ladies next Tuesday.